Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House, and a bunch of Republicans behind him, Friday announced their commitment to America plan. Nancy Pelosi came right out to call it the extreme MAGA platform. And it does sort of sound MAGA-ish with that commitment to America. I call it, as usual, a mighty huge puff of political wind right up your astronaut. This thing is meaningless and it's a loser. You know what? If I could have named it and if I could have given them some advice, here's what I would have called it. The Inflation Reduction Plan. And used it to differentiate Republicans from Democrats because they just recently passed that insane Inflation Reduction Act, which was massive government spending and massive government regulations that's going to hold back businesses from being able to produce stuff, which is the heart of an economy when we need it the most. I'll come back to explain what that Inflation Reduction Plan would have looked like. Let me just point out a couple of the really crazy things in this. So McCarthy says the first thing the Republicans will do if they take back the House, and he would be the Speaker, of course, is they would repeal part of the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically all those IRS agents. Now, here's my problem with politicians. He is a bold, in-your-face, complete liar to even say this. He knows how this process works. He knows this will never happen. To repeal legislation, you have to have other legislation spelling that out. And then it goes to the White House where Biden has to sign it. Well, he's not going to do that. He will veto it. Then it takes 2/3 of Congress to override a veto. You think a bunch of Democrats are going to vote to repeal part of what they've already voted for? Of course not. That would never happen. It is bogus. It's political wind. It drives me crazy. And then he does mention inflation and cutting government spending. But that's a joke because the very next thing he says is, and we're going to provide incentives to hire 200,000 cops. So on one side of his mouth, we're going to cut spending. The other side of his mouth, we're going to spend like crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable what we allow these politicians to say to us. So here's what should be the Inflation Reduction Plan. Number one, and by the way, the last monthly report on inflation we had was 8.3%. The Fed raised rates another, 0.75 points. I mean, we're headed for really, really some tough times. So to turn this around, the one thing Congress can do is one, stop spending money. That's the number one reason for inflation, that they can stop. And McCarthy just needs to say, we make a promise that we will not approve a single new dollar to be spent until the inflation rate is below 2%. It was 1.4 when Biden became president, and the Fed has said to us for decades, we need to keep inflation below 2%. So we're not going to spend another penny until that happens. New dollars. Secondly, we're going to go to every government bureaucracy and instruct them to eliminate or at least pause as many regulations as possible so that businesses will be free to produce stuff, including fossil fuels. It's insane that in this economic time that we're in, that's not already happening, but it's not. So that's two things. And I would say no more. The Inflation Reduction Plan. Tell me what you think.